All right. Hi, everybody. Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, so our next speaker for today is going to be Adam Harrison. He is the strategic advisor and AI transformation leader at Eightfold, and he's also an Army combat veteran. Start out today by introducing yourself, Adam. Tell us kind of who you are and how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah, I'll give you the kind of 1 to 2 minute intro. I was an Army officer for about 8 years, 6 years active duty, and then a couple years in the Ohio National Guard. All the traditional assignments. I was a platoon leader. I was, on staff. I was an aide de camp, battery commander, all that stuff. Went to combat as a platoon leader. I went to Iraq for a year. So enjoyed being in the military. I thought it was great. Made the transition. Um, for a couple reasons. My family was growing, and my wife was getting kind of annoyed with the pace of moving. And the 6 years we were active duty, we were in 4 different duty stations. So I kept getting pulled for pretty cool assignments, but it was just an aggressive pace. So we got out to slow down a little bit. I'm from Cincinnati originally, so I went there and started working for a company called Lucas Group. If you guys are familiar, Korn Ferry owns them now. As a recruiter, did that for a while and then transitioned into tech sales. So I've been doing tech sales since then. So 8 to 10 years or something, sales, tech sales centric, and have
Oh,
been enjoying myself. So
amazing. Yeah. What made you make the change into tech sales? What brought you over there?
I didn't do ROTC or anything like that. So I did some sales work in college and then enlisted in the military and then went through OCS pretty quickly after enlisting. And I knew I wanted to get into sales coming out of the military.
Mhm.
And going to Lucas initially as a candidate. So if for those of you that don't know, I'm not sure if they still do it, but there are veteran recruiting organizations out there. I think that's part of what you guys do that help you transition and find new roles. I went to Lucas as a candidate, and then they were opening a new office in Cincinnati and gave me a chance to work for them in that new office. So I fell into sales. HR centric. So all I was doing was, for those of you that don't know what a headhunter is, I was recruiting executives for other companies. They'd pay us to go find somebody, and then we'd fill that role and then get paid a fee for that. So it was all HR centric, and that helped transition into HR focused tech sales.
Okay. Is there anything from the military that really helped you get into that sales position? Is there anything that transferred over?
Yeah, I think if you take a step back and you think about your career from just a pure skill standpoint, take, branch, take MOS, take all of that stuff off of it and just look at a lot of what you were doing from a day-to-day standpoint. I was an air defense artillery officer, so it was a different career field than, being in something that has a direct correlation that's say like logistics or HR. So when I was thinking about what I was doing all the time, we were getting augmented, right? So units would have operations going on, things would be happening, and then they would send one of my platoons or my battery or something to help support. And in that support capacity, we had to kind of quickly get up to speed on what the bigger unit that we were supporting's priorities were. Like what's important to them, what are they valuing, what's the ultimate goal, where are we trying to go with this? And then how do we bring our tech, our tools, our skills to plug the holes that we can plug from our purview to help that operation achieve its mission. And that is literally exactly what sales is, right? Especially when you're selling a product business to business, you're engaging with a larger organization, trying to find out where their pain points are, what their challenges are, and then bringing the things that you represent to the forefront to help them achieve their mission. So from a skills standpoint, it made the most sense for me to
Yeah,
transition.
yeah, absolutely. I feel like sales has a lot of misconceptions. Could you kind of talk about those and what about those misconceptions about selling people at the enterprise level or selling things at the enterprise level?
Yeah, I mean, I think the salespeople that we tend to bump into the most are probably what we tend to think of when we think of sales. So like
Yeah.
it would be B2C, right? Business to consumers, like a car salesperson or somebody selling cell phones at the mall or something like that, which not trying to disparage, there's definitely, a healthy career there too, right? If that's
Yeah.
the direction you wanted to go, but it tends to be a little bit more emotional and less like kind of process project management driven, right? So if you think about, I'll give you a really good example right now. I'm working with Apple, and Apple is weirdly enough not as tech savvy as you would think for their internal systems. They have like homegrown software that they're using for some of their HR processes that's just been sitting there for 10 years without any updates, right? So they're really far behind the power curve on where they should be from a tech standpoint. So my job and my team's job is to figure out, well, what do you do now? What works? What doesn't work? And then how can we improve upon what already exists without, a gigantic, bill on the end, right? So where can we work with what you already have? What can we help you rebuild? What do we need to plug new stuff into? So it's way more consultative and project management centric than it is like carnival barker, look at me, snake oil, like here's a cool thing that you could buy that doesn't really work. Like it's a long process. Like if I was to sell Apple something, if this ends up working, it's going to take probably 18 months before
Yeah.
everything gets to the end. Looks like Nick has a question.
Yeah, yeah, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, so I was just first, thanks for coming on here and chatting with us. Appreciate you taking your time out of your day to come mess with us. Us trying to figure out what we're still trying to do with our lives. So you're more on like the solutions architect or a solutions engineering type position, or like pre-sales with the customer. Is that kind of the thing that you're doing, where you're working with the customer to help get a product for them that's best fitting for them, and also to obviously ensure that you're transitioning the language from your company to them type thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Very well-informed question. So if you think about so the sales at the level I'm at, so strategic enterprise, it's 7 or 8 figure deals, right? So these are companies that are going to spend $1 million, $2 million a year or more on technology. So it's bigger, more complex deals. And in this capacity, the role of the sales rep of the account executive is really more like a coach of a sports team, for lack of a better way to describe it. So I understand the plays, I understand all the people that work with me on this team. I understand all the skill sets that exist, and my job is to help get the ball from one end of the field to the other by utilizing this team. So the account executive is really the project manager, and then the pre-sales team, the solutions architects, the solutions engineers, different titles, different companies. They're like the players on the team. You'll bring them in when the play makes sense. So like for example, with Apple, the first couple of conversations were just me and an executive at Apple smoothing things over, greasing the wheels, opening the door. And then I brought in our chief product officer, and then I brought in one of our solutions architects. And then we had a huge meeting where all of my C-suite, all of my executives came, and a whole bunch of their leaders came, and we spent 4 hours walking through technology, which I didn't do. So I didn't walk through any of the technology. Solutions engineers were doing that. And then we had product directors and people who manage different pieces of the tool coming on to answer questions. And I basically manage that. That's my job, is to get all of the different players plugged in where they should be plugged in order to keep the momentum, ultimately to the goal of selling something. Did I answer your question? Oh, perfect.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, that was a really good question. Thank you. Matthew, you can go ahead.
What's going on, Adam? All right, so my question is kind of on the similar, you know, subject matter. So, you're talking about you're doing, you're in conversations with Apple and stuff right now, which is, I mean, obviously a huge company. So, I guess how does starting or even getting into those conversations with a massive organization like that work? Like, I mean, it's pretty easy to call up, Fast Eddie's Bait and Tackle down the street and talk to who runs the joint. But like, you can't just call Apple and be like, hey, let me talk to who's in charge. I think I can help. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Not that kind of
Well,
attitude. Just kidding.
it's a good question. So I'll answer it in a couple ways, right? So I differentiated the level of sales that I'm at, right, from some other types of sales. So traditionally, when you get into tech sales, or some other kind of, I would think ultimately kind of process heavy sales type roles, you usually start selling to what's called an SMB or a mid-market account. So small, medium-sized businesses or mid-market. So you're selling to, maybe 50 person to 200 or 300 person early stage or startup companies, or you're selling to someone that's like 500 to 2,000 employees, something like that. Every company chops it up a little bit different. So the executives are more accessible. You can do to pick up the phone and cold call people and get in front of folks a lot easier. There's a trade-off that I think helps in the building of the sales career there, though, where those folks tend to be far less informed of what's going on in the market. So you're doing a lot more education. You're helping them get a lot more comfortable spending an excessive amount of money on something and making big transitions. So it's much more relationship centric. And then as you get into the kind of top tier of sales where the deals tend to be bigger, some of those relationships have expanded also. So some of those companies have grown, but some of those people you were working with have moved into more influential roles at bigger companies. So your Rolodex and network has expanded as you've moved up. And then there are, a lot of face-to-face chances to meet people. There's a lot of conferences. Like I'll go to a conference usually once a month, something like that, where I spend a couple days with executives and people who have paid to come listen to speakers talk on different subjects and, keep themselves up to date on what's going on. But the classic cold call method does work sometimes. I have an opportunity with Costco right now where I literally just cold emailed the CEO of Costco and he wanted to chat. So you still have that, OG sales thing that could happen where you could just kick over a rock and somebody wants to chat.
Wow,
Right
that's
on, man. Thank
amazing.
you.
Yeah.
That's so
Nick?
cool. Yeah, Nick, you can go back ahead.
Yeah, my question for you real quick is I'm sure there's probably frameworks that you build your philosophy around, like maybe people's processes and procedures, and that's kind of how you target things. What would your recommendation be for somebody that's aspiring to kind of do something along the same lines as that? Like what kind of framework would you recommend? Any reading material would you recommend? Or any like I guess, influencers that you would follow?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that if I was thinking about getting into sales and I was going to read something right now, I would read a book called The Challenger. And it's based on some research that guys from a company called Gartner, Gantner, I think, Gartner, put together, and it's pretty solid. So it breaks down different personas and personality types of sellers and gives you an idea of where you might be. There's like a quiz you can take, and then it talks about, leveraging that skill set against different types of folks internally. So like back to the other question, right? How do you get in front of somebody? There's different avenues of approach that you can take at a big company to try to work your way into more influential spheres. And oftentimes what you end up spending your time with are what most people will call champions. So it's someone who doesn't really have any authority per se, but they're very influential. Like I used to sell to the government. I lived in Germany for a while selling to the federal government, and to put it in military context, right? Like a battalion commander may have a lot of influence at the brigade and maybe even division level, but they're ultimately not the one buying things for a division, right? But if you can get a high-speed battalion commander on your side thinking that the thing you're selling and the thing you're bringing to the table is going to change the life of his troops or her troops, they're going to champion you up into that chain of command and open doors for you. But the Challenger gives you an idea of how to do that and how to leverage that type of skill set to, work with big complex organizations. So I would start there for sure. I would be wary of any blog or podcast or like a speaker who is like seems to have all the answers and is like really kind of energetic and alpha in their approach to sales. I can't even think of a vein where some of those things would ever work, but they seem really popular online right now for some reason. Sales is not like there's no magic to it. There's an art and a science to sales, and the art is just understanding people and figuring out how to kind of, you know, shift gears in conversations and, move things the direction you want them to go. But the science is just repetition and organization, doing the same thing over and over and over and over again and letting the negativity kind of wash over your back. Um, if I had 20 opportunities that I was working on, like to potentially sell in any given year, I'd probably close 3 to 4 of those, right? And some of them would carry over, but other ones would just kind of go to the wayside. You'd pick them up again a few years later. So most of what you're doing is not going anywhere. It's just repetition, repetition, repetition until something sticks. So having that kind of fortitude to push through that stuff is the thing that I think makes you a successful seller. So.
Hmm. Yeah, really good question so far. Going along those lines, you mentioned earlier that in your job there's a lot of project management-esque things too. And I feel like a lot of people coming out of the military have good project management experience. So, well, do you think that their resumes would line up good if they were going up for a sales position?
Yeah, honestly, I think so. I think most people coming out of the military would make great salespeople. I think the diversity of people you talk to in the military, the
Yeah.
complexity and bureaucracy of military structures would lead well to the emotional side of selling for sure. I think one of the things that's challenging, and I'm in sales, so I can think about it from a sales perspective, but this applies to anything I think any of you are going to do, is we get used to, I think, people in the military really knowing what they're doing, right? Like, you know, obviously there are examples we can all think of where this is not true, and you've worked for somebody or with somebody who has no idea what they're doing. But by and large, your commanders, your leaders, your NCOs got to that level because they've pushed through a lot of things and understand their role and they understand how to lead and they understand their job. Oftentimes in the civilian world, that's not true. You'll have somebody who is the director of HR at a company who up until like 8 months ago had nothing to do with HR. They just wiggled their way into a position somehow, and now this is what they do. And you have to liaise with them, work with them. The place you'll interface with this the most is with recruiters, so internal recruiters at companies. You would assume they understand the positions that they're recruiting for, but more often than not, they don't really get it. I mean, they get the requirement that was given to them by a hiring team to find somebody for a specific role, but there's not a lot of creativity or strategy there. So oftentimes what you'll do more often in the civilian world is explain yourself and draw correlations. So whether it's throughout the interview process of helping someone see how your skills and the example you're giving or whatever it is correlates directly to their company, their way of talking, their specific way of doing things, or even internally, back to the project management thing, when you're working on a team and I'm coaching and I'm moving this ball down the field with all these different people, I have to be uniquely aware of where the deficiencies are in the skill set and knowledge of those people. So someone may understand the product really well, for example, but they have no idea how to talk to a client, right? So I need to figure that out in advance so I can get them prepped to go do their thing. If I rest on my assumptions that we all work here, we all know what we're doing, or this client is an executive, they obviously know what they're doing, you will never sell anything. So you have to kind of take a step back and look at things for sure from a project management standpoint, but even from like a coaching leadership standpoint to ensure that the work you're doing is actually going the direction you want it to go and leading the teams around you to the same goal. So I kind of soapbox there for a minute, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, no, that all made sense. You can tell you're passionate about it. That's what we like to hear. Going into the AI a little bit more, many people hear AI and they think about it as a tool, but I've seen on your LinkedIn you talk about systems and flows of AI. What's that distinction and why does it matter?
That's a really good question. It's broad. AI is a buzzword right
Yeah,
now that's being applied to
100%.
a lot of things that aren't necessarily like the kind of AI that I think we think about when we think about the future. Um,
Hmm.
the company I work for, Eightfold, is a great example of that, right? Eightfold is, and we bill ourselves this way, we're the only true AI-centric talent tool on the market, right? So we have been built as an AI tool from day one and have expanded the capabilities of that one AI to include a bunch of different things. Oftentimes, when people talk about AI, what they're talking about is like automation or kind of a predictive AI tool where it's like an automation plus. It's doing a thing, but it's not really able to do a thing on its own. Like if you think about Siri or Alexa, they have to be prompted, they have to be given information, and then even then the information they give you back isn't always right. So when we think about AI systemically changing something, the AI that I'm thinking of, the AI I'm talking about is smart AI. It's intelligent AI that can do something by itself without you having to really give it much prompting or priming. So like we sell a tool called AI Interviewer, and there are some companies out there using it now. Like if any of you were to interview at Amgen, which is like a biohealth company, you would probably interview through the AI interviewer. And it's just like this. You're talking to a person, it's an avatar, it does the okay, hold on. You can stop the interview halfway through, you can ask it questions, you can push back on it, it'll push back on you. But what it's doing beyond just like, doing the interview with you is it's analyzing a bunch of other things, right? So it's looking at your speech patterns, it's deciding if it's looking how many tabs you have up, it's, triaging whether you're cheating or not. Like if you're doing a software engineer interview, what tabs do you have up? Are you looking away from the screen? Did you turn the camera off? Like all these red flags that the recruiting team would then see. And then it's able to push you forward, right? So if the recruiting team says, yes, this person's great, they'll schedule that next interview. So it acts like a true recruiting assistant and can act autonomously. So the AI transformation that's happening right now, the important one that's really going to disrupt a lot of career fields is that agentic, smart thinking AI that's able to do the work of a lot of entry-level jobs. Did
Yeah.
that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that answer, that's insane to hear, honestly. It's how it's progressing is crazy to hear from different people. Nick, you have a question?
Yeah, are you referring to like AGI? Sorry, I lower my hand. You're referring to like AGI?
Yeah, like
Is that
agentic AI? Yeah.
so like yeah, I gotta get to a meeting. Otherwise, I'd love to sit here and talk more about this, to be honest.
Yeah, I
Just
mean,
ask these
connect with
guys.
me on
That's all I ever
LinkedIn.
talk about.
Yeah,
I
we can chat.
appreciate you.
Yeah. Yeah, we can chat offline for sure.
Yeah, getting into the interviews a little bit, could you give us some tips after being in the kind of the HR in that field? Um, a lot of the transitioning veterans stressors are nailing the interview, having that good resume, actually getting into the interview, getting responses. Could you give us some of your top tips for that kinds of stuff?
Yeah, it's a crazy world out there. So
Yeah,
the best way to think about, I'll give you a bunch of different advice here. So
yeah,
a resume should be considered like a piece of marketing, not like a personnel document, if that makes sense, right? So not to say you should embellish or lie, that's not what I'm getting at, but your resume is designed to just pique interest. Like no one's going to hire you because of your resume. They're going to talk to you because of your resume. And what often I think happens with folks coming out of government career fields and academic career fields, because those resumes tend to be similar, is you put too much on it. So you I left the military as a captain. I had a whole bunch of different roles that I was in, right? But if you were to look at my resume today, it's very similar to LinkedIn. It says captain, a couple of bullets that make sense for the types of roles I'm applying to, and that's it, right? Like I don't break it out by like unit I was in or specific combat mission or anything like that. You can if you want to flush your resume out, but you want to try to civilianize those titles, use 2 or 3 bullets per position, and try to make it make the most sense for the roles you're applying to. You have the advantage today that I didn't have of ChatGPT that can be real helpful in skills translation. So you could put your crazy long military resume on there and say, I'm looking at roles like these ones and put some job postings in there and say, help me create a resume that's going to be much more relevant for these positions that meets the requirements of common, applicant tracking systems today and stuff like that. So 2 pages, kind of to the point. That'll get you so far, right? If your resume is really dialed in and it's to the point. The big thing that you should be doing is networking, like more than anything else. And LinkedIn helps with that quite a bit. Just make a lot of connections at the companies you want to go to. You don't necessarily have to overthink those, just search recruiters, search talent acquisition people, click connect, 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 connect. Some of them are going to connect with you. You can send them an inbox message, introduce yourself, let them know who you are. You're really interested in this role. You've been researching the company. The goal is to let them know that you know about the company. You're not spamming people. Give them your resume directly, right? The more you can hit different angles, so obviously applying to the roles you want with a dialed in resume is going to help, but then networking yourself into those interviews is going to be probably the most impactful. Once you've applied, find other veterans that work there, especially if they're in the kind of chain of command of the role you're trying to get into. That's super helpful. The interview rates for a lot of companies, especially if you're thinking the big marquee companies for outsiders, is pretty low. So you have to get yourself in somehow through some networking. And those DMs are a good way to do that. Once you get into the interview, the it's hard to scale some of the military vernacular back a little bit. I saw a guy one time who got asked a question about, typical interview question, like tell me a time that you were in a stressful situation and how did you deal with it? What was the like what was the end result? That kind of thing. And he told a story about being on a patrol in Afghanistan and his gunner got shot in the neck and he patched the guy's neck up while returning fire, and it was a really cool story. Like, I mean, it was a crazy combat story, but you're talking to someone who has zero context for the military or combat or anything else. And what ends up happening when you militarize your examples too much is that they tend to start seeing you as like a movie character or the background of a CNN clip and not as a person who has skills relevant to their job. And I know it sounds crazy, but it is 100% true. So you want to dial yourself back a little bit and come up with examples that are a little bit more palatable for the type of environment this company is operating in and how you're going to see yourself there. Like I wouldn't put security clearances on a resume unless the role required it. That's a good example. They get caught up in that. They'll see secret or top secret and think you're Jason Bourne or something and only want to talk about that. So it's anyway, hopefully it's helpful.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I would never think that like someone would think about like military people like that, but that makes sense from an outside view. But I feel like I don't know about anybody else. That's just something that I would never personally think about. So that's really good to know. What's or tell me about yourself is a really important question in an interview. How do we get a good tell me about yourself answer without it sounding super scripted or just like I'm rambling on to a friend?
You should definitely practice. You want to keep that to
Okay.
about a minute, 2 minutes tops, right? So you should practice that for sure. And you got to think about the objective too, right? I mean, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about writing the resume and how to answer some of those other questions. Your goal is to develop trust and to help this other person with that trust know that you've got the right skills to at least continue being considered, right?
Yeah.
And you want to keep it really to the point. So back to this idea that the resume is marketing, everything you say is also marketing. So if you think about like a brand like Nabisco, for example, owns Oreo and a bunch of other companies. If Nabisco advertised every product they have in one commercial, we would miss it. It would make no sense to us. And it wouldn't get us to want to buy necessarily any of those products, even though they have a bunch of things and they're very skilled across a variety of things. They pinpoint it to very specific products and very specific times of the day on very specific apps because they know who's watching. You have to do the same thing with your approach, both job searching and interviewing, and go, who is this company? What's important to them? You can get a lot of this off of ChatGPT and the internet right now, which makes it helpful. And shape the way you answer questions around what seems to be the most important thing for this company and for this hiring team as you go forward. So even answering that question, right? Like, we all often have diverse backgrounds the longer we're in the military. Like I was an aide de camp for a while. I was a platoon leader. I was a battery commander. I worked on an infantry team, even though I was an air defense artillery officer and an 11 alpha slot. So I had some diversity. So depending on the company I'm talking to, I'm going to leverage different pieces of that. Maybe the aide de camp stuff is the most important. So as I introduce that part of my career, I'll have a couple bullets from there that I talk to. Maybe it's the platoon leader stuff. I'll pull that up a little bit. So you don't have to say everything, I guess, to get to the point of what I'm getting at. Just say the things that are the most relevant for that position and for that role. And it's hard to tell sometimes, but you can ask questions in an interview. If an interviewer asks you a question and says, "Tell me a time you dealt with a stressful situation," you can pause for a minute and go, "That's interesting. I have a lot of experiences coming out of the military. This was, a common part of our role. What types of stressful situations do you see this type of role finding itself in most often?" And then
Hmm.
let them give you more information on the role that you can then shape your answer to. It looks engaged. You're asking questions, you're getting them talking. The more they can talk, the more they feel good about you, weirdly enough. And then you can answer the question better.
Yeah, yeah, I would have never thought about that. That's really interesting. What I ran into a couple times is like one of us will be really, really qualified for the entire role, but then there's one thing where there's just no way we could have experience in that because we've been in the military. Maybe it's something like very civilian, like we couldn't have gotten the experience in that. How do you show your value in yourself in an interview if you don't have, they ask you have the experience in this one thing and you don't have?
Yeah, that's great. And that's super common. Whether you're in the military
Yeah.
or not, that's super common rolling through positions. So again, we're coming out of the military, so we're used to roles and assignments having very locked in criteria, right? An
Mhm.
infantry platoon leader does this. A supply sergeant in this type of unit does this. The, someone was asking me earlier about pre-sales positions and they throw like solutions architect, solution consultant. Every company is going to have a different title sometimes for the exact same thing. Like you'll have the same role be called a bunch of different things, and you'll have the requirements be slightly different per company. Every organization wants to see themselves as like a unique entity that's game changing, and they're the head of the pack, and everything they do and their culture is so unique and so different. No one could possibly match it. Or, if you're going to sell us technology, for example, using my role, well, it's got to be customized and it's got to be unique to our workflow. And then I have to pretend like, yeah, you guys are such, unique snowflakes, but like your workflow is the same as everybody else's. Everything you're doing is the same. It's not you're not that unique, right? But they want to feel that way, and they'll write job descriptions up that pull on things that are not necessarily relevant for the position. So if you're hitting, I would say 6 or 7 out of 10 or 15 things, I mean, you're more than halfway there. The other stuff is risk. So what you have to focus on is alleviating risk in how you're talking to them. So you have to recognize that going in, or as they bring it up, kind of quickly shift to go, okay, this seems to be an area where they're weary and are feeling some risk with taking a chance on me. How do I alleviate that risk? So if there's, I don't know, if it's like a software engineer position and you've got, 7 certifications out of the 10 and there's 3 that you don't have, drill down and ask questions like, well, how often am I working in Python or whatever it is that you don't have? I do have some experience. I have worked in it. I have touched it. I just don't have the certification yet, but I'm working on it. Like there's ways that you can get them to explain to you more of where that gap is so you can help talk around it or just address it head on and say, look, I know I don't have this, but these are reasons why I don't think it matters in a kind way, right? Like I'm still able to do this. At my last role, I was doing this. Um, just don't let them make the assumption. You have to kind of really make them feel comfortable in absorbing the risk of that deficiency that they think you have.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Moral of the story, get the interviewer to talk. That's what I'm getting out of this. Get them to
it's
start
true.
talking.
And again, back to this idea that they don't always know what they're doing. That you sometimes will have things in like, job descriptions that aren't relevant. I mean, I had a peer when I was a headhunter that spent 6 months working on a software engineer role using the requirements that were given to him by the company, looking for somebody that had 6 years of experience in a very specific type of program language, just
Mhm.
to find out that the recruiting team that gave him that role, so the internal team, had like a little dyslexic moment and put the program language in the wrong order. So he was looking for a program language that didn't even exist. But that was what was listed on their job website too, was this program language that doesn't even exist. So there was not anybody who could have had it because they misheard the hiring team and then flip-flopped some letters. And then so in this, telephone game of getting the role out to market, it went out to market wrong. And they were spinning their wheels looking for somebody that doesn't exist. So there's always the challenge there of pushing back and saying, do you really need this? And getting in higher in the chain of command, back to this idea of networking is helpful
Mhm.
and getting rid of some of those risk concerns because those people at the very beginning's career depends on the quality of candidates they're pushing forward and they want to
Mhm.
look good. So they want to make sure that you look good when you're pushing somebody. So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah, that just makes the networking that much more important.
yeah.
Jeremy, do you have a question?
Yeah, my question was, well, first of all, thank you for coming on to speak to us really about this IT sales and everything under this umbrella. My question was more so tailored to how do you get that 30% of lack and spin it to a positive rather than it, because sometimes it may not always be the case where they don't know what they're doing, because I have spoken to some recruiters that got into recruiting in IT, but they used to be that
Yeah.
guy doing the desk work, what I'm trying to do within cloud. So how do you spin that 30% of lack? Because these are things that I know that even if I don't know it right now, this moment, I can easily learn it. How would you spin it into a positive thing that is like that 30% that you're missing is actually a good thing or something? How could you spin that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for technical skills in particular, they're so evolving and changing, and the necessity of certain things is obviously changing quite a bit as companies are transforming and as tech requirements change. So even being fresher, so it's like, is it better that I had Python as a certification that I haven't used it, but I got it 5 years ago, or is it better that I'm working on it today? Right? It's better that I'm working on it today. It's better that I have more modern context through the training that I'm about to do to close that 30% gap than it is to have kind of touched on it a few years ago. Like I have a Salesforce administrator certification because it's a common uh, relationship management tool that we use in sales. And I got it so long ago that if I had to do any administrator stuff in Salesforce, I would look ridiculous because I don't remember how to do any of it because I
Mhm.
got the certification like 6 years ago. But it's on there. So is it better that I have it or is it better that I have it fresh? So there's that perspective for sure. And I think that there's an advantage for a lot of companies now, the mindset's shifting. So for a lot of you, there's an advantage right now that companies are thinking more about skills and soft skills than they are thinking about bullet for bullet job requirements, right? So like the tool that I sell, Eightfold, if you were to apply to a company like Netflix that uses Eightfold, you don't even have to apply. You can send your resume in, and then it'll reorganize the job board based off of the obvious skills that you have on your resume, but then also what we call skill adjacencies. So for tech people in particular, you have certifications in a couple of things, and we know that people who have certifications in these three or four things are the right type of skill set person to then go get certifications in these types of things. Like it's the same kind of soft skills profile. So it's a good gamble to hire somebody and then give them the ability to train, as opposed to constantly looking for a needle in a haystack or finding the wrong person like me who has a certification from years ago but doesn't know how to use it anymore. Companies are more willing to have those skills conversations. So if you're able to articulate that in an interview too, where you're like, I don't have it yet, I plan on getting it, but I know that because I have X, Y, and Z, I would be really good at these things, and I could catch up really quickly, take a chance on me, that kind of a thing. Companies are willing to do that, especially more so in tech right now than a lot of places, because it's such a revolving, changing thing. Hopefully that was helpful. It was a little big, but
It was.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really good to know because I feel like we all have a lot of really, really good soft skills, but we might not have all that experience that they're looking for yet.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, if anybody else has any questions, raise your hand because I just have one more question. If everyone in here could take something away, maybe a mindset or some kind of shift that they could do while transitioning right now to going into the civilian world, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that the hardest mindset shift probably is, and then this maybe sound kind of crappy, I don't know, right? But like we get thanked a lot for our service. People are really like, I have military stuff on the wall behind me because it's a good conversation starter. It's just things from my career. You can see my LinkedIn profile. Most of the time when I'm on a sales call, somebody wants to say something about it, and then that's it. Like they could care less what I did or what my experience was or any of those things. And then even now, right? Like I've had some sales leadership positions where I've led sales teams. Right now, I'm in an individual contributor role where I don't have a team. But if I was to start talking to somebody about leading a team here, this leadership that I've had as a salesperson would be far more important than the leadership I had as a military officer. And then early in my career, trying to get that first sales leadership position, it was as if they didn't know that I had led teams before, right? I had to be like, well, my battery was 100 people. I had all these direct reports, like we had all these complex missions. We had people all over the place. I'm like, yeah, but did you? It's like that kind of thing, right? Like, is it the same? Like they have a hard time seeing some of those correlations. So I think you have to kind of dial back and feel like, okay, I am starting over. I have a bit of a bump because I have a resume and I have some career experience. And if I'm not going directly into a defense adjacent kind of role, I'm not working for the federal government or a defense contracting agency, I'm going to go work at Uber or something. You're more early career than I think you are sometimes, and that's okay because your pay catches up way faster in the civilian world than it does in the military. Like within 5 to 6 years of hustling, you'll make more than a brigade commander or maybe even like a one-star general. So you'll be able to surpass your military earning potential much quicker. But that first couple of years, they're not going to look at you the same way you were being looked at as an NCO or an officer in the military for sure, right? So some of that clout that you're able to build is going to go away, and you have to be okay with that. And you have to be more of eyes open, mouth closed learner than you have had to be for a little bit. But be that person for sure. Ask a lot of questions, be vulnerable, admit you don't know something, but hustle to get the right answer and do the work that is important in that role to show that you're catching up.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it might not be advice that we all want to hear, but it's really, really good advice. So thank you so much for coming in. I don't know about anybody else, but this was super helpful to me. I got some questions answered, so thanks for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. This was awesome.
Yeah, for sure. Anytime. And feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any other questions or want to talk about anything, just hit me up.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, have a wonderful